Hey there, it's Graciela here. In today's video, we'll be learning how to handle dynamic IDs in Power Automate when you're working with browser automations. For this example, we'll be working with this web page where you just go into this option and then you try to log in using your credentials. The issue is that every time you load this page, the ID for both the user and password changes. So when Power Automate tries to write on these two text inputs, it won't be able to find them because the ID that we used to record the automation in the first place no longer exists because it's a different one every time. So in this video, we'll be showing you a couple of ways in which you can work around these issues and help Power Automate to properly recognize the elements in the web page, even if you have dynamic IDs. Just before jumping into it, it's important to mention that Power Automate uses jQuery selectors to identify which element it needs to click on or which element it needs to write something on. So in this specific video, we'll be showing you a couple of ways in which we can make these updates, but really there are many ways in which you can achieve these type of updates in your automations, and many ways could work because as soon as you are giving Power Automate a valid jQuery selector, it will be able to recognize it most of the time. So if at some point you find a web page that is hard to automate and it has a lot of different elements and it's hard to identify what's the best way, you can just Google your problem and then just add the keyword jQuery and you will find documentation, blogs, and forums of people talking about how to recognize certain elements in jQuery selector, and then you can just translate that into your Power Automate workflow, because this is not really a Power Automate concept, this is a web development concept. So there's a lot of documentation and a lot of information on how to use jQuery selectors and how to identify elements based on text or based on attributes. Okay, so now let's jump into it and let's go ahead and go to Power Automate and start a new flow. And we are going to start with the recorder. And the URL we're going to be working with is this one. So let's copy it and let's start a new instance of our browser. Then let's indicate this is the link we want to start with. Let's close these other windows and let's start recording. The first thing is just clicking on this button, which doesn't change. And then we come to the screen that we know has dynamic IDs. For now, let's just write some numbers here in the user and then some numbers here in the password. And then let's just hit on done. Okay, so now let's close our browser and try to run this and see if it works. Since we know this has dynamic IDs, we know that it's not going to work, but we are going to also see it in action. Okay, so now we reach the page that has dynamic IDs, and we know that we see that Power Automate is not doing anything. So if we just go back here to our automation, we see that step number 4 failed because the element is not found. And here you can see that Power Automate is telling us that this input, this HTML tag of type input with this ID is not found. And it's giving us this long identification that this specific tag has. If I go to my web page and then I right click on this element and then I inspect it, you are going to see that I immediately see this input tag, which is the same we are working here in Power Automate, but you can see that the number that we have after this, the X is different. So this is what is dynamic whenever we come to this web page. So even if we now change it to this new ID, the next time we come, it's all as well going to have a different ID. So there are many ways in which we could fix this. One way is trying to find another element or another attribute inside this specific tag that we can use to recognize the specific item that we are interested in. So in this case, we see that this input has some other attributes. It has the class, it has this name attribute, it has a role, it has area required, it has many things, and it also is part of a hierarchy of other HTML tags. We see, for example, that we have here this div type tag, and then we have a label, which is the text that is asking us for the user. And then we have some other 4 levels of div elements, and after that we have the input. So we could either find something in the upper levels or in the parent tags for this input to try to identify what we want, or we can also just play around with the attributes that this specific item has. We are going to see how we can do both. To start with, we can see that this last part of our ID stays the same, and we also have this attribute called name that has the value NIT. So if I copy this and I paste it here, I just need to make sure that there is no other element inside the web page that has this same name. And when I search, I see that there's nothing that has the same attribute and the same value, so we are good. We can use this one. Okay, so now that we have identified what are the attributes that we can use, in this case is underscore NIT and the name. Now let's go back to Power Automate, and there are 2 ways in which we can make edits to this configuration, because this configuration is saved inside Power Automate and we can update it anytime. We can either double click on the element and then on the action that is failing, and then it's linked automatically to the element from the web page, and then here click on the edit icon. This will give us this interface where we can make updates, or we can just go to the right side of the screen in this section that is called UI element, and then I can just click on the element that is not working and it's going to give me the same interface. For now, I will just double click on it and then edit, because that way I'm sure I'm working with the right one. And you can see that when I open this screen, I have 3 sections. In the section in the middle, I have all the hierarchy of tags that lead me to the input tag that I'm interested in. And you can see, for example, that if I select elements above this, you can see that it adds some code automatically here at the bottom. So we can use this checkbox to help Power Automate find a specific root of tags that we want to work with. But in this case, what we just need to do is to update this for the ID to end in underscore NIT. So for that, we just need to find in the right side of the pop-up the element or the attribute that we're interested in this case is the ID. And what we want to do is we want this to end with underscore NIT. So I will just change this from equals to ends with, and then I'm going to remove the text that I know is going to be dynamic and I know it's going to end in underscore NIT. And if I scroll down a little bit more, I see that we also have this name equals NIT. So I'm going to also select it to use both the ID and the name, and that will make sure that we are always going to be hitting with the text to the right text input that we're interested in. So that's one way in which we could do this. So the second way, I am going to copy and paste this same action. And I'm going to double click on it, and then I'm going to open this and click on Add UI Element, because I want to select a different, the same element again to make sure that we have one configuration with the name that we just did. And I want to create a second configuration so we can see another way in which we can recognize the element from the web page. So this is going to give us this pop-up. And what we just need to do is to select the input text and then use the Control key in your keyboard and the left click, and then it will just recognize the element. If I hit on save, you're gonna see that step number 4 is linked to input text NIT2, and this one is linked to number 3. Whatever I do to number 3 won't affect number 2, and whatever I do to number 2 won't affect number 3. So with that, I will just double click on number 3, and then I'm gonna click on edit. Again, the tags, the elements in a web page are grouped in hierarchies. Some of them are parents and some of them are child tags. So in this case, you can see that we have our input text here. And after that, we have 4 div elements that are like the parents of this input text. And after that, we have here another parent that is a div tag. And you can see when I hover over this div tag, I see that a box around the section for the user field. So when I have that, you can see that all this element, everything is grabbed inside this group. So I could use this group, and I can use the text that is here to help Power Automate identify what's the element I want to click. So I can set up Power Automate to find the div element with this specific text, and then just find the root all the way down to the input element. So that's another way we can do it. I will just make sure that we don't have this text anywhere else. So I'm just gonna search this in my HTML code, and you can see that we don't have it somewhere else, so we're good. So now let's go back to Power Automate, and we know that after the input, we have 4 divs, and then we have the parent div here above the 5th one. So if I just go ahead here and select everything, and you can see that we have here the 5 parent divs, and then we have the input at the end. So Power Automate, as we did it last time, as we did it in the first example, usually recognizes the attributes quite well. But when we want to do some text contains, but it's not, we cannot do it from this interface. What we need to do is to enable the text editor. So I am going to enable the text editor, and here I can add custom attributes. And this is, for example, when Googling your problem and finding how a jQuery selector works is very useful, because here you can add your custom selectors or your custom configuration that in the regular interface you won't be able to add. So let's go here, and we know that we want to find the first div that has this specific text. So I'm gonna copy this text, go back to Power Automate, and then write and I'm going to add a colon and then write the word contains. Then let's open and close parentheses. And then let's write double quotes here in the middle. And then after that, let's just write the text that we know that this div element contains. And now we are telling Power Automate that it needs to find the element, the div element or the div tag that has this text in the content. It doesn't necessarily need to have it in this very specific div. As soon as this tag contains this text anywhere, it will work. And then we are telling Power Automate that it needs to find 4 divs, and then it needs to find an input text. So in this case, we are not going to be using this ID because we are giving this text as in the indication, and there we are telling it to follow this path all the way to the input after 4 more levels of divs. If we know, for example, that we have 2 inputs or 3 inputs, we can also use the colon and then write equals, and then, for example, 0. And this will help Power Automate know that we need to find the first input. But in this case, we know that we only have 1, so we are safe with this path. So I'm just gonna save and just hit on save. And finally, we just need to see how to update the password. So let's go back to our web page and right-click on it and then inspect. And then let's try to find something that will make this element or somewhere around it to unique, so we can find a way for Power Automate to recognize it, even if we have these dynamic tags. So, okay, we have for sure this dynamic, it even has more characters than the previous one. We see that it doesn't have a keyword like the underscore and IT, so we cannot use that. But if we see some levels above, some of the parent tags that we have here in our HTML, you see that we have here one level, then another, and then this one has the ID equals password. So just like we did previously with the text, we can also use the ID of another element and then give Power Automate the route or the path it needs to follow to find the element that we care about. So in this case, we could help Power Automate by giving it this div with this specific password, and then we can indicate it needs to go down 2 levels, and then it's going to find the input. So let's go back to Power Automate, let's click on edit, and then let's go all the way down, and we can see that Power Automate is just recognizing the input tag. And so let's go back here to tags above, and then the other tag that we know that has the type, the ID attribute as password. So you can see it's here, and This one, Power Automate did a really good job recognizing the elements, because you can see that once I click on it, I didn't do any other change. It recognizes that this div tag has this specific ID. So we don't need to update this, because Power Automate is just recognizing it automatically. Because in case if it's not recognizing, we would just need to just come here and then select it, and then just write whatever ID we know it has. So after just selecting these 3 elements, and then you can see that the first part is ready. Now we just need to change here our input to just remove this dynamic part that we know is not going to be there. What we could do is either remove the whole thing like we did with the text editor previously, or what we can do is just use the contains logic, and we can tell Power Automate that we want to find the input that we know it's going to contain dx underscore dx, and then this way Power Automate will be able to recognize it, because we see that the first 5 characters will always be the same, dx underscore dx. So we can use that, or we can also just go back to the text editor and remove the whole thing, or the other thing we can do is just here and then remove the ID from here as well. We could do either or, and both of them would totally work. So let's save. And for the sake of testing, I'm going to move step number 5 to step 6 at the end, so we can see how this changes to this one. And I'm going to also change the numbers here, so we see how the numbers change from step number 4, in which we are using one configuration, and step number 6, in which we are using a different configuration. So let's run the automation and see how the 3 ways we updated are now working, and Power Automate shouldn't have any issue recognizing the inputs that we defined. So yeah, here we go. It recognized correctly the first one, the second one, and then it went back to use the text that we have here instead of the ID or the name. And you can see that the 3 ways that we build these examples, it worked, and now Power Automate doesn't have any issue. If I run it again, because we know that the IDs will change every time we load it, it should run okay it should run okay again, because we are now using the elements that we know that are fixed in the web page, and we are playing with the jQuery selectors to help Power Automate identify the elements that we want to write on. And again, there is not a set way to do this. There are many ways in which we can use jQuery selectors. If for some reason the way that you're working with or your web page becomes complicated, just make sure to use the text editor and play around with different examples that you can find in Google, because usually there you will find a lot of documentation that will help you identify good ways in which you can help Power Automate using you can help Power Automate in recognizing the elements in your web page. So I hope that this was useful for you. See you next time.